I don't know what else there is to say about this Phillies team. So you know what we're going to do? We're not going to talk about the Phillies at all today. Not once. The journey of the Sixers NBA playoffs starts on Saturday, and the journey that is trending in the AM starts in 30 seconds.
Fourth and goal.
And a very good morning, everybody, and welcome to Trending in the AM right here on Philadelphia Sports Network. We're live, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. You know the drill. Like, share, retweet, follow on all social media platforms. Make sure you hit the like and the subscribe button. Turn those notifications on. If you want to get interactive with the show, questions, thoughts, concerns, as we're talking Sixers, NBA playoffs today on the show, head over to the Facebook or YouTube page. Best places to drop those questions and comments. I'm your host here every single morning, Phil Stifel at Beard and Knowledge, and we're joined today by my main man, Scotty from DSM Media. I said it in a post last night on Twitter, Scotty. It doesn't matter where we are doing content. Sixers, NBA playoffs, Scotty and Phil, the conversation happens every single year. Good morning, my man.
Good morning, man. I'm happy to be here. Happy to be talking NBA with you, man. Like you said, we've been doing this. It's kind of a ritual almost. So
it absolutely
do this every year. We got to, man. Doesn't matter the brand, doesn't matter the cross platforms. Let's get it in today, my man.
That's right, because nobody wants to talk Phillies anymore. The Phillies have pretty much burned all their bridges.
I'm Phillied out.
Already burned their bridges. It's pretty pathetic that 12 games in that they've burned so many bridges. So we got to talk this. And we're going to talk today, the Sixers mostly. We're going to get into the rest of the NBA as well, those playing games and stuff like that that we've seen the last two nights. But initially, your initial gut feeling as this journey begins. How are you feeling about this Sixers team now that we've had like a week off? You know, they've rested their starters, their stars. Are you feeling any better, or are you like me that you're still in a very neutral state right now with this Phillies or the Sixers team?
Yeah, I think I'm in a neutral state right now. Like you said, I can't get too excited because I know the road that's in front of the Sixers, and it's really tough. I mean, it's the toughest of all of all the paths that you could take to the NBA Finals, or even the conference finals. Right? It's one of the tougher paths. So I'm staying neutral. I want to see what they look like ultimately against Brooklyn. I want to see if James Harden's looking healthy. Joel Embiid, obviously, we want to see him looking healthy for the playoffs, but I would say just that, as long as these guys can stay healthy, and we made it through the regular season, right? No season-ending injuries, knock on wood. Oh, my goodness, knock on wood. But no season-ending injuries, nothing permanent, nothing long-term. We just had a little bit of soreness towards the end, which guys got rest, and we were still able to keep the 3 seed. So I think just as far as health and stature, I'm confident, right? They have as good of chance as anybody. I would put them in the top 5 of best chances to ultimately win the NBA championship. Now there's a tier of 3 that I would kind of put by themselves right now, and then there's 2 others that I would put in the
I'm curious then,
fraud category, and
we can talk big picture there for a second. Obviously the 3 above them. You're saying the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. Who else do you put ahead of the Sixers at this point? Because right now I've got them. If I had to do like a NBA playoffs power ranking, I would have the Sixers as the number 3 team in the whole NBA.
So I'm tempted to put the Suns in that top 3 category. Okay. That's the team that I'm looking at. They're undefeated with Kevin Durant since he's played in the lineup, when he's actually played in the lineup. And they have experience. I mean, they've been to the finals. They've been to the conference finals. KD's won championships. Monty Williams, he's a coach that's been renowned around the league for a couple years now, winning coach of the year last year, I believe. But nonetheless, I think the Suns have the pedigree. Now they're another team. Can they stay healthy? So you could maybe put them in the category with the other 2 teams that I was talking about here, and that's the Sixers and the Nuggets. I think the Nuggets are in the same exact category as the Sixers. They haven't proven anything in the playoffs to make you trust them, but they had a great season.
But the Nuggets are probably like that I've talked about legacies this year a lot. You know,
Yeah.
about the Sixers. The Nuggets
Yeah.
are kind of in that same category. That
They
Jokic
are, yeah.
legacy is kind of on the line. Is he just a regular season MVP guy
It's
that can
so
go short in the playoffs? We hate the Nuggets because of the MVP talk.
yeah.
There's a lot of similarities about the storylines of those teams.
They're the West Coast version of the Sixers. I think that's like the most hilarious part about it. You're talking about the only two teams in reality that run their offense through their centers, right? Now, obviously, Jokic works out of the top of the floor most of the time, setting up other guys, but still, they're two teams that operate moving through their center. They're two teams with MVP candidates at center. So they're very similar through all the turmoil between the two fan bases. I actually have them grouped together in their own category of they have the talent to win the championship, but do they have my trust? No, I don't trust these teams to go out here and beat the Milwaukee Bucks, the Boston Celtics. And I mean, the Warriors, they're another team you can just throw in there. If they get Wiggins back and he's all right, they're going to be right there. They're a scary team. I mean, playing the Kings in the first round. Love what the Kings did this year, but you get the defending champions in the first round, and it's all in California. So is there really home court advantage? I mean, we'll see. Sacramento fans are pretty rowdy, but I think it's a wild west out there.
It's been a while since the Sacramento Kings have been in the playoffs, and I remember back during the Chris Webber era. That arena in Sacramento was always jumping every single regular season or playoffs. That arena. Yeah, it was jumping. That was one of the hottest tickets. Weren't the owners of the Kings like originally like the original UFC owners or something like that? Back then, whoever owned it back then, they owned another big company, and they were always partying, and they were like the celebrity NBA owners. They had a lot of fun, always packed that arena with celebrities.
I'm happy for them. I'm happy for them, honestly.
Good. I mean, De'Aaron Fox, it's really good. You get Buddy Hield out of there. You make some moves, and to see them play well. I've been supporting that. You know, I was
like a win-win trade between them and the Pacers, man. You get Halliburton in Indiana, and you get Sabonis, who's a perfect fit in Sacramento.
All right, so let's skip back to the Sixers.
Yeah.
Let's do this. And what's up, Big Ed? How you doing this morning? I hope you're excited for some Sixers basketball because the Phillies are bringing us Ed no joy right now. Joel Embiid. It basically we could say it's Joel Embiid and James Harden, but it's really Joel Embiid. The Sixers playoff run, their journey that starts Saturday, 1:00. It runs through Joel Embiid. And, you know, I think we heard somebody, I forget where it was yesterday, he was quoted as talking about the MVP, and it actually does mean something to the players. It does seem like he is going to get that MVP award. Do you think that, you know, at one point you would say the motivation was there to prove that he's the MVP. Now do you think that he is going to get it? That gives him another added chip. Like, I've got the MVP. Now I've got to prove that it's not a fluke. I got to prove that I'm worthy of this award. There's been a different kind of aura about Joel Embiid this year, a different different focus, and I think it can continue into the playoffs. And if there is that focus, he could single-handedly get us through the Celtics, the Nets, the Bucks, and stuff like that. Where are you on his focus? His concerns or not concerns, his thought process with the MVP, and just his overall game at this point right now this year.
Yeah, no, it's a great question because Joel Embiid, he's always going to be the focal point of this team, and like you said, it starts with him. And I think when I look across this team, Joel Embiid is the guy I'm least worried about. I think he's going to be there. I think he's going to show up. I think he's ready to go. Like you said, his mindset this season, it's been way more serious. I think there's been a lot less trolling on social media. It's been a lot less social media in general for him. He hasn't really been participating, which I think is interesting. He'll post a picture on Instagram every once in a while. But what I really look at is those big games that we saw throughout the season. And how the Sixers fared in them. They were very resilient. Yeah, they got down against a couple of the better teams. They were able to fight back and win a few of those games. And Joel Embiid stayed engaged. And in the second halves of those games, you could see his intensity turn up a notch. And what that lets me know is that Joel has a zone that he can get to, similar to other star players, right? We've seen Devin Booker go through the playoffs on a heater. We've seen Giannis go through the playoffs on a heater. Kevin Durant, so on and so forth. Joel Embiid has that capability. He can go on a heater through the playoffs, average 35 to 40 points. Now, it's going to get a lot tougher, right? But he can do that. That's where his game is at right now. You're talking about the leading scorer for the last 2 years. He's figured out how to score in the NBA at a high and efficient rate. So I'm really not worried about Joel. It's all about his health. He has to stay healthy. That's why against the Brooklyn Nets, you have to take them serious. You can't overlook them because you need to take care of them quickly. You need to get them out of there 4 or 5 games max. Because I'm looking at the Celtics and I'm looking at the Hawks. And I know we'll get into that later. I'm not going to get too deep into that. I think the Celtics are going to get the Hawks out of there quite quickly versus playing the Miami Heat, which we would have hoped for them to play. So I think they get the Hawks out of there in 4 or 5 games. So that means the Sixers need to do the same in order to keep pace with the Celtics and keep their guys rested, right? You don't want to overwork Embiid.
You know that Celtics series, that Celtics series is going to be a bang out, grind it.
Yeah.
Series 6-7 games. You need to get through the Nets. And again, I don't want to look past the Nets. I was looking before the show. I think they're 9-1, 6 plus 900 or minus 900. Sorry, minus 900 to win the series against the Nets. So the odds are just way, way, way on the Sixers. And I see so many people saying, "Oh, we're just going to sweep right through them." The Nets are a good team. Joel Embiid still has to go out there and dominate. James Harden still has to go out there and dominate. But if you play your game the way you're capable of playing, it should be not an easy series, but a winnable series in 4 or 5 games. You might have some close battles, but you still got to take care of business. Because if you look past Brooklyn, they can easily. They're a well-coached team.
They can steal some games from you.
Absolutely. They could drag it out to 6 or 7 games because they're playing with house money at this point.
Exactly. They're playing with house
everybody
money.
Thought once they traded Durant, traded Kyrie, Ben
going to drop.
Officially gone, that it was just going to fall to pieces. But they've held their own really well this year. So you don't want to look past them. So Joel needs to come out and do his thing and dominate and get this over with in 4 or 5 games.
I agree. That's exactly where I'm at with this series. And, Joel Embiid, just to kind of cap off the point on him and move to James Harden, he's the best player in the league, right? He's about to win the MVP. So, this season, Joel Embiid is the best player in the league. So we have to go into each and every series with some confidence that he can will us to a win. Because ultimately, that's what you ask of your main guy. You need him to will you to wins on certain nights. And I think he could do that throughout the playoffs. We saw him against Toronto, man. Toronto played us really, really tough last year in the first round. Embiid was not phased. He was not phased by what Nick Nurse threw at him. And he's developed so much as a passer, Phil. I think that's the biggest thing. I talked about it earlier in the season, the difference between him and Giannis. Giannis attacks the rim. He's looking for guys to get the – Embiid's doing the same thing now. The double teams come. He's looking for the open man. He's finding the open man. So I'm loving his mindset.
It's not like the old days when Boston would crash with a double or triple team, and it's an instant guaranteed turnover.
Exactly.
He now knows what to do with the ball when those double teams come. So
it's such a smart player.
It's almost like eliminating that even option for opposing teams, the Nets, the Celtics. Yeah. They don't want to.
Yeah,
double shooters. That leaves James Harden or Tyrese Maxey open for the pass, and he's capable of making that pass. And that brings us to the other guy. It's through Joel Embiid and James Harden. All the other pieces are important, but it's those two. And this is the first time, knock on wood, that I can remember entering the playoffs in a while that I'm not worried about Joel's health at all. I know he's got a little back shoulder; he's always grabbing it. The feet, the ankles, the knees, whatever, the back. Yeah. They're just going to be things that always bother Joel over the course of a season.
Big guy.
I'm a big guy, and it bothers me on a daily basis. You too, probably,
Yeah. My back hurts, and I don't play basketball 82 games.
James Harden, man, that Achilles. Are you concerned at all about it? Because they didn't play the last 2 games of the year, so it's going to be a good 9-10 days off for these guys. And if it's really just soreness and not an injury, those 9-10 games should have gotten James Harden, rested up enough. Because there was a point in this season where I was talking on this show that James Harden wasn't going to win MVP, but was playing at an MVP level that if you got a 5th place vote or a 6th place vote, that James Harden's name was going to be on that list. But then that Achilles that burst, kind of losing it with the Achilles issue. Some of his game has kind of slipped off lately with it. Where are you with the confidence level that he's going to be not MVP James Harden, but pretty damn close to it at this point?
Yeah, because I know exactly what you're talking about. Right out of the All-Star break, I mean, he was killing it, and then you have the game against Chicago where the Achilles. That's where the injury turned in from foot soreness to Achilles soreness when he had the 5-point game against Chicago in overtime back in Philly. Um, I'm a little worried about James Harden. I shouldn't even say a little. I think he's the biggest question mark on this team. And when I say the biggest question mark, I say that because he is the most important question mark, right? There's other question marks. There's,
Right.
Tobias Harris. Is he going to show up at all in the postseason? Like, there's other question marks on this team. Tyrese Maxey, and his slumps against Boston. But James Harden is the biggest question mark because he is the other guy that you need to be their man in the team. He's the guy that you will need to pick it up some nights if Joel is feeling a little beat up, right? Or if Joel is dealing with whatever the case may be. Maybe Joel's just having an off night. James Harden has to be there. Now, James Harden had one of his most efficient seasons that he's ever had in his career, shooting the ball, right? Shooting the ball from 3-point, especially. But the thing about him, you mentioned the last few games, and so the last 10 games, he only played 5 of them, and his numbers dropped quite a bit. So you were looking at him; he was at 21 points per game, 6 rebounds, about 11 assists on the season, 44% from the field, 39% from three. In the last 5 games that he played, he's down to 16 points per game, 8 assists per game, 3 rebounds per game, still 40% from three, but nonetheless, the numbers are down quite a bit. Now, some of that could be, blowout wins, him coming out early. There's a lot of stuff that could be mixed in there, but he obviously looked like he slowed down a little bit towards the end of the season. So you hope that the 9 or 10 days of rest get his legs back under him. I will say, I saw over Easter Sunday, he was actually down in Houston at the Toyota Center, like getting workouts in. So he's putting the work in. He's still getting the training in, even during this downtime, like he should. And hopefully, I know we haven't talked about Doc Rivers at all yet. Hopefully, he's got these guys practicing and getting ready.
Well, we know he's not a practice guy, Doc Rivers.
I know.
I wanted to get to Adam's point here with Maxey and Harris, but we're going to get back to that in a second, Adam, because Scotty brings up Doc Rivers, and I kind of feel like it's almost like, we're not worried about Joel. We know what Joel's going to be. We're worried about James Harden's Achilles, and Doc Rivers. Like, what can Doc Rivers do to change? Like, is it really Joel Embiid has to change the narrative around Doc Rivers? Or is Doc Rivers capable of doing something in this playoff run, the Nets, Boston, whoever it may be, wherever it ends, wherever it goes through, whatever? What can Doc Rivers do to change that narrative? Because you know me, I've been anti-Doc Rivers since the day he was hired. Yeah. But all he's got to do is get us to the finals, and all of a sudden that narrative changes really quickly.
Yeah, I agree. I think you said it right there. Get us out of the second round, and boom, he's done more than any Sixers coach since Larry Brown. So that's pretty much all he has to do. But no, being serious, the hockey shift lineups. He said he's not going to do it in the playoffs. That's one thing that you just can't do in the playoffs, right? Switch 5 in and 5 out. He's got to stagger those 4 guys that we mentioned so far in Tobias, Maxey, Harden, and Embiid. You got to stagger them. I would keep 2 in the game at a time, right, at least. But I think the main thing for Doc is when you see the game, I don't want to use the term getting out of hand. It's the point right before things get out of hand. And Embiid's not in the game. You got to be ready to get him in the game, even if it goes against your minutes and how you have everything structured, whatever the case may be. You need to be able to put Embiid in the game when you know you need Embiid in the game. So just pressing all the right buttons, and that's what good coaches do. But the same thing, the next thing that I would say for Doc Rivers is having them prepared for the Brooklyn Nets, right? It's hard for us to not look at the Boston Celtics in the second round as fans, as people that cover the Sixers, but they need to be focused on the Brooklyn Nets. They need to get out of that series as fast as possible. And they do have some guys that will give you some fits, right? Some young guys that fit the pedigree for what annoys Sixers, right? What does well against the Sixers. You're talking about shooters and athletic wings. They have plenty of them in Brooklyn, and they like to let it fly from the 3. They like to run and gun. They like to play fast. They like to play up tempo. They use their youth to their advantage. So I think Doc Rivers, he's going to have to show his experience throughout each and every one of these series, right? Because Brooklyn is going to be a completely different animal than Boston. And then if you somehow make it past the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be waiting right there for you, and that's a completely different animal, right?
See,
So
the question
Doc
though,
Rivers is going to get plenty of chances to show his
but the
experience.
question is what you're saying and everything that you're saying, and I go back to what you said first about him staggering the guys and not 5 in, 5 out. He said all this, and I think we talked about all this last year going into the playoffs.
Yeah.
And he said all the right things before the playoffs. Then the playoffs came, and we were still running, 4 or 5 bench guys at a time. So what has changed, like in Doc Rivers' head? Is he just going to flip a switch and realize his mistakes over all this time? Because he has to realize it.
Yeah.
But he's one stubborn SOB, and he does what he wants to do at all times. And it won't happen, but it wouldn't surprise me if all of a sudden Dwayne Dedmon gets into a game instead of Paul Reed or Montrezl, because even though everything says one way, Doc Rivers does what he wants all the time.
See, and that's how he can ruin it, right? Like that's how he can go right back down to where he kind of is with the fans by doing something like that. Excuse me, I had to burp there. By doing something like that, putting Dwayne Dedmon in a playoff series, like do not do it. Honestly, don't put Trez in the game. There's plenty of guys you just don't put in the games here. And I would even go as far as to recognizing, like, if George Niang is not playing well, if he's not shooting the ball well, if he's out there getting exposed on defense, because that's the thing about playoffs, right? Teams are going to find these mismatches and they are going to just beat on it like a wall, like a hammer on a nail, right? Like they will find George Niang in the mismatch and they will pick him out every single time. So if he's not shooting the ball, it's little things like that. Doc has to recognize very quickly, get that out of the game before it costs you the entire game. But yeah, if he puts guys like Dedmon in the game, I mean, then yeah, we're right back to square one.
It seems so odd.
Doc has earned a little bit more respect this season, the way he's handled things. I think he's done fairly well this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's had his best year coaching since maybe back in Boston, honestly, in my opinion, regular season wise. But also, we have to say that, I mean, we've read this story before.
Yeah.
When everything's going one way, he decides to go another.
Yeah.
And you talk about the rotation, like George Niang's a guy where in a playoff series, you should always shrink the bench minutes and stuff like that. Paul Reed's going to play 7 to 10 minutes every game. Just Joel's break period. That's it. And I say 7 to 10 instead of like 8 to 12 because in a playoff game, Joel should be playing 39, 40 minutes every single game. It just should. That's why you've rested him all year long and protected him to get him ready for this moment. But really, the rest of the bench, you should only be playing. Jalen McDaniels should get run pretty much every day. Obviously, DeAnthony Melton run every day. George Niang, he could get 5 minutes, in my opinion, in the first half. And if his shot's not falling, he doesn't need to be seen the rest of the game.
I agree.
You can legitly run with the 5 starters and just DeAnthony Melton and Jalen McDaniels coming off the bench, and that's it. That's all you need, really, in a playoff series, in a playoff situation, is those 2 guys coming off the bench.
Agree.
If Niang's hot, if he comes in, knocks down 3 of his first 4 shots, then you could give him a little bit more run. You cut down on PJ or Tobias's minutes in the second half, but that's it. That's the whole entire rotation. Shake, sorry, I love you, Shake, but you're not seeing the floor in the playoffs. A lot of these guys just don't need to see the floor. Is that about where you're at with this playoff rotation at this point?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said there. I think you got the everyday type of guys. I think you got those spot on. McDaniels, his length, his athleticism, that's going to be needed throughout the playoffs, right? You look at the first round, you got wings. You look at the second round, you got wings. You look at the third, you're going to see athletic wings throughout the playoffs. That's what works in the NBA. So he's going to need playing time. Paul Reed, you mentioned it. If Embiid gets in early foul trouble, if Embiid, different things could cause Paul Reed to get more playing time. But I agree, 7 to 10 minutes max is ideal, right? And then of course DeAnthony Melton. I think he's going to be like your 6th man type of thing, where he's the first guy off the bench. I would drop Daniel House and George Niang in the same bucket. I think that you try George Niang first just because he's a little bit more trustworthy at this point. If his shot's not falling, maybe you try Daniel House. He's a little bit more energetic. He's a little bit more athletic, and he could also shoot the 3. So sometimes he is a better option if Niang isn't playing. It doesn't seem like himself, right? The shot isn't falling.
Can we get off on a tangent for 1 second?
Yeah.
I want to get your thought on something because you bring up Daniel House.
Yeah.
And I've talked about on the show, we haven't done a show in in a little while together. I want to give Daniel House a lot. Daniel House. I keep messing this. It's Daniel House. Some credit because that guy came in here. I crushed him. I didn't want him even signed here. He fell out of the rotation and then kept putting the work in. Doc saw it, gave him a chance, and when his second opportunity came, he was ready to go. And the last month of the season, Daniel House has, earned himself back into some form of the rotation versus someone like Furkan who just looks miserable when he loses his playing time and then never fights to earn that right back into the rotation. Do you see the same thing there from House?
Yeah, I do actually. I actually am glad you brought that up.
To a guy right there,
Yeah. I want to give him some props as well. I think you brought up a great point because it's so easy to like fall out of the rotation. And like you said, Furkan Korkmaz, Furkan's a decent guy, right? He's not trying to be a nuisance on the bench, but he's obviously not happy. He's not getting playing time. He still comes in and plays when he's told to, but it's just different, right? You see Daniel House, he's coming out, he's diving on the floor for loose balls, man. And however many seasons he's been in this league, right? He's a veteran, and he's coming in on a very low contract out here and really giving it his all. And you can just tell he's a guy that wants to stay in the league, right? He's teetering on and off of a guy that's completely, benched versus a minimal rotation guy, and he's trying to improve that. And I think in that last month, he did. He kind of there's part of me that feels like he is a better option than George Niang, if I'm being completely honest.
Especially with the athleticism in the playoffs.
Yeah, he brings more, and I feel like it's ideal. Do you feel that you would find yourself getting Daniel House picked on in a mismatch in the play? I just don't feel that way. When I look at George Niang, he's the guy that can get abused if he gets switched on screens to the wrong guy. Daniel House, he just comes out, he plays with his all, and I think as Philly fans, we can really, really respect that grind and that hard work that he put in. Yeah.
I love
his confidence, right?
But even the comparison between him and George Niang, if George Niang or Daniel House is playing 18, 20 minutes, then we've got a problem.
Even that's fair.
All things considered, if either of them play or both of them play, if they're playing more than 10 minutes, then Doc Rivers isn't managing the minutes of everybody else on the bench or the starters the right way. Because to go back to Adam's point here about Maxey and Tobias Harris and what they need to do, and you can throw PJ Tucker in it. We've been, waiting for playoff Tucker, playoff PJ all year. There's only so many minutes to go around. Honestly, I would not be surprised. And me and you, we're both big Tobias Harris guys, big fans. It's hard to boast being a Tobias fan at this point right now.
Yeah, these days.
Honestly, out of the 5 starters, Tobias might be the guy that gets the lowest amount of minutes at this moment each game. You know what I mean? Because if you're going to bring these guys in, it's PJ Tucker was brought here to play in the playoffs. You're going to get 35, 37 minutes out of him every single game. So Tobias is the X factor about I don't know what we're going to get out of him. And I don't know what the Sixers expect out of him come playoffs here.
Yeah, Tobias Harris, he's one of those big question marks, right? You just really don't know what you're going to get from him. And, I've kind of lowered my expectations on Tobias to an extent. Well, I've gotten to this point, man, and I feel bad about it because, I love Tobias. I've met Tobias. I've talked to him. Like, he's a good guy. Like, he really is. And he's a really good basketball player as well. The fit, right? He doesn't always get to express himself through his game, I guess you could say. He just doesn't get the touches. And his game is very similar to Embiid's when you look at where they operate on the floor, where they're comfortable at. But when he's shooting the ball from the three-point line, when he's shooting it confidently, he's an ideal piece to this team. So what I'm hoping for Tobias Harris, this is my optimism showing. I'm hoping that Tobias Harris can pick up right where he left off towards the kind of right when we were approaching the All-Star break and right after, where he was shooting the ball 40% plus from the three-point line. And if he can do that all postseason, he's going to be fine, man, because he does everything else. He rebounds the basketball. He runs the floor. He plays defense. He's usually guarding one of the better players on the other team. He does everything else. It's just whether or not that shot is falling on a given night if he ends up with 5 points or 15, right? Yeah. And I think he's just got to keep himself ready mentally. I think that's the biggest thing for Tobias Harris. know your role, know the shot, know where you're going to get your shots, because they're going to be the same place in every game. It's going to be in the corner, up at the top of the key. It's going to be from the 3-point line. That's just what you're looking at from when you're playing
One thing
beside
with him,
Embiid.
when
He's
it's
got to
not
stay
going
ready.
when it's not going his way, he does not let it affect him defensively, or
Yeah,
it's not like he ever sulks or hangs his head on the court. He's always mentally engaged in the game.
exactly.
The only thing he did wrong this year was call himself a sharpshooter, because ever since he called himself a sharpshooter, his numbers went like crashing through. He was shooting like 60% for like 5 games in a row. Yeah, I'm a sharpshooter, and all of a sudden he
Oh
falls on
my
the cliff. It's like, come on, Tobias,
I
that's not
know.
what we expect out of you.
I know, but hopefully he can get that sharpshooter mentality back in the playoffs.
Look,
That would be a revelation for the Sixers, man. I think that would be a game changer, honestly, if he could shoot the ball
it's
well.
really, though,
during
what
the
you say,
postseason.
the confidence in his shot. When you see him catch and shoot instantly, or
Yeah.
catch and drive instantly, when you see
Exactly.
that half a second of hesitation, that's when it all falls apart for him.
Yeah. That's when you know it's going to be a rough night for Tobias, when he's hesitating at the 3-point line and not taking him and Maxey, man. They're similar. Now,
Yeah.
Maxey, he's a little more consistent than Tobias at this point, I would say. He obviously averages more points as well. He has a higher ceiling in any given game, but they're very similar. When they're hesitating, they are not playing what, like, the flow of their game means so much to whether they have a good game or a bad game. And once they're in their head, you can truly see it, right? So that's the main thing with those two guys. They got to make sure they're ready to go, because Embiid and Harden, as much as we've talked about them throughout this show, these are the next guys up. These are the other guys, right? We'll talk about D'Anthony Melton a little bit here as well, but Tyrese Maxey, he's a guy. He's played well all season, right? And he shows up in the bigger matchups. It's just that Boston series, man, that worries me in the second round. Everything keeps pointing back to Boston, by the way, which I know we'll get to expectations for the postseason. But everything points to that series, because Maxey, aside from Boston, he plays really well. Like that's like his kryptonite, right? And that tends to be the case for a lot of guys throughout the league. But I'm hoping he can get over that hump. But Tobias, man, he's one of the biggest wild cards. I don't put him as the biggest question mark, just because I think James Harden's more important, and he's a question mark as well. But I would put Tobias right behind him, maybe tied with Doc Rivers for question mark going into the postseason.
It's kind of crazy. We spent the whole show. We've talked about pretty much every name on this Sixers roster that's going to get playing time, except for Tyrese Maxey. And it's kind of crazy, because I don't want to. I mean, he's the 3rd leading scorer on the team. He's kind of like, I call him like the spark plug. He's the little guy that just can energize this team whenever things are going south. And, we kind of forget about, how important he is to this team. And yeah, all things point towards Boston, but I'm not as concerned about Maxey versus Boston come playoffs as others, just because Joel Embiid, he had problems with Boston for how long? He figured it out. I have confidence that Maxey can figure it out. And in a knockdown, drag-out 7-game battle against Boston, I think Maxey eventually figures that out a little bit, and he'll have his 1 or 2 good games there. I'm not as concerned there. You want to talk about D'Anthony Melton there for a second. To me, I know Jalen McDaniels was a great late addition to our bench and stuff like that, but obviously D'Anthony Melton, we could run a 6-man rotation. As long as I see D'Anthony Melton on the floor, I'm happy. He's had an up and down season first year in Philly, but he's played really well, especially when he comes off the bench. Just think about it. We basically traded Danny Green and got D'Anthony Melton. It's got to be one of the best moves that Daryl Morey's ever made. He's going to have a big impact in this series, and he'll have a big impact in the Boston series because of his defensive ability.
Yeah, I agree, man. Everything you said about D'Anthony Melton there, he's been one of the best acquisitions, maybe the best pickup of the offseason, quite honestly. Absolutely. You talk about PJ Tucker. I do like the PJ Tucker signing for experience, add that veteran leadership. We'll see what he does in the postseason if he can fulfill that contract. But as of right now, I would call D'Anthony Melton the best acquisition of the offseason in reality, aside from bringing James Harden back. I guess we could put that in the category. But looking at D'Anthony Melton, man, it looks like he's starting to get his athleticism back towards the end of the season. He was dealing with like that sore back issue throughout the year. And he's a guy we saw in Memphis with the explosive dunks. I know you saw the highlights of him when he was coming into Philly. So I'm glad to see him getting that back, because that's another facet of his game that he just hasn't really played with all year. He's getting rebounds and putbacks. He's able to dunk the ball again now. So I'm glad to see him getting more healthy in that sense. But the revelation has been him as a shooter. Like the nights where he can hit 3, 4, 5 threes in a game and he's just feeling it. Those are the things that can win you a playoff game, like one playoff game in a series and change that series. So I think, I'm looking at DeAnthony Melton. We talk about other guys outside of that top four, right? You have Tobias, Maxey, Harden, and Embiid. DeAnthony Melton is my most important other guy throughout this postseason stretch. He's going to have to stay out of foul trouble when he does come in. He can't come out there and get quick fouls because he's going to be the guy to guard guys some nights. And there's going to be some nights where it's Harden, Maxey, and Melton on the floor, right? 3-guard lineup. And then you have Embiid and Tobias or Embiid and PJ. And I think he's got to be ready in these situations. When I'm looking at DeAnthony Melton, he's a guy who I think has to step up, not in a capacity manner. So, like, he doesn't need to go from averaging 10 points to averaging 15. He doesn't need to do that. He just needs to be consistent. He's talked about him having up and downs throughout the regular season. We need the best version of DeAnthony Melton each and every night. And if he can consistently give us 10, 13 points, maybe 2, 3 threes a night, along with the defensive efforts that he brings and the rebounding, he's going to be a major plus. You mentioned him against Brooklyn. He's going to be a big factor in matching up. I'm sure he's going to get some time on Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Spencer Dinwiddie. It's a bunch of guys you can throw DeAnthony Melton on in that series. And then against Boston, I think you're going to have to use him in a sense to match the sixth man of the year in Malcolm Brogdon. That's why I'm really looking at DeAnthony Melton, because you look at that last game against Boston of the regular season. I know it's regular season, so you can kind of throw it out. But you look at Boston's bench production, it was 18 points, all from Malcolm Brogdon. So that's their bench, right? That's their sixth man of the year. He's the best bench player in the league. DeAnthony Melton needs to match that in some sense. And I think he can get ahead of that by getting ready against Brooklyn and building some consistency there in that series. But DeAnthony Melton's going to be huge, man. I really like what he brings to the floor. So to your point, one of the best acquisitions that Morey's had since he got here.
So let's look at this Nets series, because again, like I said, we tipped at it early in the show. I mean, it's a win. The Sixers are going to win this series. It's a matter whether they can get it done in 4 or 5 games, or if they let the Brooklyn Nets hang around. And I'm looking at the Nets roster, and I just pulled up a random game from like 2 weeks ago, and I said it before. Jack Vaughn's got this team playing with nothing to lose kind of attitude.
Yeah.
He's done a great job coaching this team, honestly. Really, really good job coaching this squad. And, first and foremost, obviously the name Mikal Bridges is going to jump out at everybody because of his, Philly connection and all. But, I mean, there is no star on this team. You got a lot of role players. You got Dinwiddie, Claxton, Finney-Smith. You got the snipers and Curry and Harris. There's no name outside of Bridges that jumps off the pages and says superstar or anything like that. You know what I mean? And it's like, how can we not look past this team and realize that there is a chance that they can win a few games here?
Yeah, I think that's the big thing is like they need to understand the objective is win this series in 4 to 5 games. Like, it's not just win the series in 7 games. You need to have the mindset to go out here. You definitely got to take care of business at home, right? But then you got to go and steal one in Brooklyn in the second part of that series. But they got to get these guys out of here in 5. They can't play around with their food in the first round, or they're going to be in really big trouble. You mentioned the Brooklyn Nets and kind of what Jacques Vaughn has done here. Even losing Kevin Durant and Kyrie, right? It loses all the juice. You lose Ben Simmons for the season, which that might have been a blessing for them. That might have been a good thing for them. Nonetheless, you look at the Nets and their rankings and all the major statistics as far as team statistics. They're second in points per game in the NBA. They're fourth in rebounding per game. Rebounding. We know the issues that the Sixers struggle with rebounding-wise. They're first in the league in assists per game, and they're fifth in the league in opponents' points per game. So they play good defense, right? They're top 5 defensive unit when it comes to points per game. So they're a top 10 team in most of the big statistical categories. And then on top of that, you look at just the way their roster's made out. They're built to space the floor. They have athletic wings that can drive and shoot. So that it's going to be a lot of run and gun. It's going to be a lot of run and kicking out. You have Claxton, a guy that just eats up the boards. He can catch lobs. He's going to be annoying. Now we'll see what mood Embiid's in, because he will have to play Claxton. He's going to have to keep up with him, and we saw it in the regular season. Embiid kind of playing around with him. Claxton was able to put up decent numbers against him, but you could tell Embiid wasn't putting the full effort in there. So we'll see how that goes. I feel like Claxton could be a really annoying player in this series. Spencer Dinwiddie, man, he's the guy that worries me. I know Mikal Bridges, he's been averaging like 25 plus points since he got to Brooklyn. He's going to be a nuisance by his role, right? He's going to get a lot of shots. But Spencer Dinwiddie is a guy that has historically killed the Sixers, whether he's in Brooklyn, Dallas, Washington Wizards, doesn't matter. Now back in Brooklyn, he's a guy fit-wise, right? The way he plays stylistically just seems to bother the Sixers. You look at him throughout his career, 16.5 points per game, 5 assists per game, 4 rebounds per game against the Sixers. He's a guy that I'm watching out for. He's a leader of that team. He's the veteran presence. He and Dorian Finney-Smith. Those are two guys, right? You look across the roster and you're like, oh, this is a young team. 2 of their guys have been to the NBA Finals, in Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, right, from the Phoenix Suns. And then you look at Dorian Finney-Smith and Spencer Dinwiddie. These are 2 guys that went to the Western Conference Finals last year. So they have more experience in reality than Sixers per se, right? You have PJ Tucker, who has a championship. You have Harden, who's been to the conference finals, in the finals. He went to the finals with OKC, but they have a little bit more experience in deep postseason runs than the Sixers. So this is all stuff you have to factor in. Now, what it comes down to is pure talent level. Who has the best players on the floor? That's the Philadelphia 76ers by far, and that's why they will win this series. But it's one of those things you can't play around. I ultimately do have the Sixers winning this series in 5 games against the Brooklyn Nets, but I do think you could see 2 to 3 of those games be really close. Somebody from the Nets, maybe it's Seth Curry, drops 32. His season high this year was against the Sixers with 32.
I would not be surprised if something like that happened.
Maybe somebody
I
gets hot.
randomly pulled up the last Nets game, not the last Nets game, because Easter Sunday, that game, you can throw that out the door. The last game before that we played, Sixers Nets, and it was the 101-98 victory for the Sixers. That was during the Maxey bench experiment. That feels like ages ago. So glad that that's over with now. But in that game, I mean, it's exactly what you said. You had guys, you had Mikal Bridges grinding away. You had Dinwiddie grinding away. Claxton didn't have his best game that game against Joel, but Joel Embiid and James Harden put up 63 of the 101 points. And the rest of the team just complimented those 2 guys. And that's basically what we're going to hope for and expect in this series. A lot of 101-98, 110-101.
Yeah.
Close. You're not going to see a 110-87 blowout where Kirk getting in on clearing the. You're just not going to see that. It's too well-rounded of a vet. Like you said, it's not as young of a team as we think it is, the Nets. And hell, Finney-Smith and Dinwiddie are guys that for years now I've been like, we
wanted them.
I would love them on our bench. They'd be perfect complements on our bench to what we've got in Joel Embiid.
I agree.
I hate them when they're on the opposing team, but they would be players I would love on the Sixers. So you can't just write them off. But again, 5 games seems very reasonable. Maybe they steal one in Brooklyn. Brooklyn does, you know what I mean? Maybe they win one at the Barclays Center. But you just got to take care of business. And that's all it comes down to. Take care of business, protect yourself, but don't look past them, because again, I love this narrative in all sports whenever it comes up. Playing with house money. When you're playing with house money, it's like the Phillies last year. The Phillies were dangerous because they were playing with house money. Get in at the last second. Nobody expects you to win. You're playing free. You're playing loose. There's no pressure. All the pressure's on the other team. You lose, just hypothetically speaking, if the Sixers come out and lose game 1, now all of a sudden the pressure that mounts on the Sixers now all of a sudden becomes a 6-7 game series.
That's exactly
house money.
What I was going to say.
There's always that narrative there in my mind, and I think it is to me, it's the only thing that can stop the Sixers from wrapping this up really quickly.
I think you hit the nail on the head there with game one. I think that is a big statement game. You were in Philly in the middle of a Saturday afternoon, prime time spot for you to ruin our Saturday. So please don't do that. But no, on a serious note, game one, I think we'll be able to read the room and see what type of mindset the Sixers are in, because if they come out, I would honestly, in game one, I know we said no blowout. I would like to see them come out in game one and blow them out and set the tone, if it's possible, right?
Well, they're 8.5-point favorites right now on Saturday, minus 355 money line. So the money line, I mean, everybody's saying they're winning that. But the minus 8.5 does tell me that the bookies think that there is a chance for a blowout in game one, and that would set the tone. And I almost feel like if you could blow them out in game one, that kind of just takes the house money win out of Brooklyn sales, and then Brooklyn just kind of packs it up for the rest of the season.
It needs to be one of those type of performances where it proves everything that we've discussed true about the Brooklyn Nets. You don't belong in the same series as the Philadelphia 76ers, right? Because ultimately, if the Sixers are going 6 or 7 games with this Brooklyn Nets team, there's an issue, right? Like we're having a problem, and there's no way you can pick them against the next team in line if they struggle with the Nets, because the Nets are not the barometer at the end of the day. This is an easier matchup than the Toronto Raptors last year. I would rather play the Brooklyn Nets than the Raptors, the Heat, the Chicago Bulls, even at the bottom there. It's all about star power once you get to the playoffs. And it's about mismatches and who can create the most mismatches. And I think that's one advantage the Sixers have. They have the mismatch king, because there's nobody that can match up with Joel Embiid. And then that trickles down to the rest of the matchups, because when you can't guard the top guy, that means you're going to have a bunch of trouble having to defend the other guys. So ultimately,
we got them winning this series. We both got them in 5.
Yeah.
So where are you? Because I actually at this point think that they could get past Boston as well. I think it's just their time. Just like it's time for Joel to win the MVP. It's time for them to get past Boston. But I think the combination of the Nets and then the Boston grinding series, I think they fall short against Milwaukee, who's got such an easier path to the NBA Finals than anybody, even the Celtics. Like if the Celtics beat the Sixers, that's still going to be a grind out, and it's going to be Milwaukee in the NBA Finals. Yeah. The question is, and it's just they're going to get just far enough to create the offseason conversation. Do you bring James Harden back? Do you bring Doc? They're just going to do just enough. But where are you? That's where I'm at. Where are you with this team?
So I need to see what they look like in the first round before I can say whether or not I think they can beat Boston. I think they have a puncher's chance at beating Boston. I would say the Boston's the favorite, obviously, given the way they've played all season. Just their makeup, you can see mentally as well in those late game situations. They're just so composed and well coached. Joe Mazzulla, right? We thought they were going to fall off when they lose Ime Udoka at the beginning of the season. No, they just get, in a sense, better in some sense. But I think that the Sixers can beat Boston. I think if guys are able to step up, like Tyrese Maxey in that series, if he's able to play the way he's supposed to, if we don't get those eggs right from James Harden, that's one thing we can't get from James. Is those little egg games where he puts up a zero burger, 5 points, 3 points. But I think Boston, the matchup, you look at it, 1-3 against Boston this season. So from a confidence standpoint, I'm probably at a 45, maybe, right? Okay. Like if we're teetering 50-50 or 60-40, I'm at about 45, 55.
I'm on the other side. I'm about 52 to 55 in that confidence meter right now. But it could be swayed like you in this Brooklyn series.
It's so much can change from the first round, injury. What's going on with Jaylen Brown, right? If he's having a hand issue, he broke his face earlier in the year. Right. He's had these comments about playing in Boston and his future. So what's that look like? How does Robert Williams look? Is he healthy? There's a ton of stuff to look at here, and we'll see what they look like after the first round. But you look at Boston, they're one of the deepest teams, if not the deepest team in the NBA. They have guys that come in off the bench. I know we talk about the Sixers shoot. They have like legitimate shooters that come in and they make their shots every time. There's no off game for these guys. And you look at their matchups with the Sixers, you just see a couple of their role players that seem to play out of their minds when they play the Sixers. Like Derek White, for example. He's had some of his best games this season against the Sixers. Who's the I'm forgetting the guy. The power forward, Grant Williams. I was forgetting his name there for a second. He's another annoying guy. They'll throw him on Embiid sometimes. Al Horford, we know about him. So it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be a knockout, drag-out fight in the second round. I would imagine it has to go 7 games if the Sixers are serious and want to win it. But ultimately, I'm with you. I don't see them ultimately getting past the Bucks if you have to go through the Celtics as well. That's just ridiculous, man. And what are the odds that the Sixers come out of that series fully healthy even, right? The way they're going to be banging around against the Celtics. Knock on wood, hopefully they do. But it's just such a tough road when you talk about the top 2 teams in the NBA being in your path to just getting to the NBA Finals, right? Yep. And then once you get to the NBA Finals, maybe that's the 3rd toughest team that you would play. But either way, it's the top 3 teams in the NBA right above you. So while it's going to be a tough path, I will say they have the opportunity to silence all critics on this path, right? Mm-hmm. You win in this capacity. We've talked in previous seasons where the path has been easy, right? Like all we had to do is, beat the Wizards, and then we got the Hawks with no playoff experience and Trae Young in the second round. Oh my God, we got the path to the Eastern Conference Finals. You go out and you lose anyways. So I don't even know how much we should put into the path being so tough or so easy, because it really doesn't matter. It's kind of a luck of the draw when it comes to the health of your team. And all we can hope is that our guys can stay healthy throughout these matchups. And I think they can play with the best of them, right? If I had to pick today, if I had to say today what I think is going to happen, I would honestly pick the Celtics over the Sixers. I would say that they would beat them in 7 games, just given they have home court advantage and the struggles the Sixers have had against the Celtics this season. But depending how the Sixers come out and handle the Nets, I'm not saying that, they come out and beat the Nets in 4, they're going to beat the Celtics. But it's just a mindset, a confidence that they should be playing with at this point in the season. If I see that, I think my mindset will change. Either way, by the time we get to the second round, I'll be picking the Sixers over the Celtics.
Oh, absolutely.
But right now, while I'm in my realistic mindset and I'm not overly optimistic or too biased, I would say the Celtics are going to knock the Sixers out. And from that standpoint, you talked about bringing Harden back in. Doc Rivers getting another season if they get past. If they don't get past the second round, strong chance Doc Rivers gets fired. Maybe James Harden goes back to Houston. Down the line, we might see some changes here. So
that's all for the offseason talk.
All the marbles in the second round.
Got like 10 minutes or less here left. I want to bring up one other thing. There was a point in time when I was really against adding more playoff teams and the play-in series and all that. But I think this week has changed my mind drastically. I think these play-in games this week have been fantastic basketball, giving these guys one last thing to play for. The one and done March Madness type feel of the games, specifically that game. The 2 games last night, I think, were top-notch games. I mean, OKC. I know Isaiah Joe fans were excited about that when he really was a 1 for last night and really didn't affect that game. And then the Bulls being able to make a massive comeback. They were down, 15 or 16 against the Raptors in the second half. Huge comeback, huge moment for Zach LaVine on a national stage. I mean, those teams really don't stand a huge chance to advance to the second round because they're all facing the Bucks or the Denver Nuggets or whatnot. But these playing games have been fantastic. And, the NBA really nailed it with this whole, extension of the playoffs here.
Yeah, I agree. I think just that factor, like you said, the one and done, similar to college March Madness, just gives it a completely different feel. Like we just said, all the marbles, right, in one game. And you see guys playing their heart out last night. I mean, the Bulls were down however many points. I think you said 14 points at one point against Toronto.
Yeah.
They're in Toronto, right? And at one point, the Bulls just decided we're going to play some defense here. We're going to try to get back in this and try to make the playoffs. And ultimately, they were able to do that. They were able to turn their defense on to a different level. And I think, the thing with the Bulls, the interesting part is Alex Caruso, right? Adding him into the mix. He's been beat up most of the season, but he's a great defending guard, and he gets rebounds. He's able to push the ball. So I think he makes such a big difference. Patrick Beverley's made a big difference in the identity of that team defensively. So yeah, I think the play-in, the idea of it as a whole gets us the opportunity to see teams like this where, I didn't watch a ton of Bulls basketball this year. Like they just weren't that good. They weren't very entertaining, but last night they were electric, right? And it shows you what they're capable of. I tweeted it out last night. Zach LaVine, he had up over 30 plus points in this game. He went on a tear in the second half. And I tweeted out, I'm seeing something from Zach LaVine. Like he wants to win. There's been question marks about him. So it gives like that opportunity for guys to show how much they want to win. And then to that OKC and New Orleans game, you know how much I like the Pelicans, obviously. A bunch of Duke guys on there. Brandon Ingram played out of his mind last night. There's a guy on the Pelicans, Murphy the third. That guy, he's so lengthy. He shoots the ball. So he's one of my favorite players in the league. I wish the Sixers had him because he's exactly what they need. But you look on the other side of that OKC team, and you gave them the opportunity. I think this is the best part about it. Such a young team, and you gave them the opportunity to get a playoff type feel. Even if they go out and they lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves on Friday, you got a playoff type of experience for SGA, Josh Giddey. It's so huge. They don't even have Chet Holmgren. They're going to get another couple draft picks, I'm sure. They have a ton of cap space. So this team is a team that, by the way, they nailed that last draft. Even with Chet missing the whole season, the two Jalen Williams that they've gotten are complete rotational guys, right? The one Jalen Williams is up for conversation of Rookie of the Year with Paulo. So this is a team that I honestly don't know how much I would want to play this team because they're so young. And you talk about, a team playing with no expectations, right? They're playing just for fun at this point, just for the experience.
I'm just going to tell it right now. They are going to knock out the Denver Nuggets in the first round of the playoffs. I'm just calling it.
Dude, you look at the Nuggets. Who's going to stop SGA? I mean, that guy plays out of his mind. In the second half of that game last night, he was unstoppable. And then you throw in a mix of like this versatile type player like Josh Giddey, who's another one of my favorite young guys in the league. Look at him last night. 31 points, 10 assists, 9 rebounds in that game. Borderline triple-double. 11 for 22 from the field, 3 for 7 from the three-point. He's not a guy that is even known to shoot, but he's worked on his game. And he's another piece there, man. So anything that they can get from this playoff run is going to be a plus for OKC and Oklahoma City because they got Chet Holmgren coming back. They're gonna restock everything and get even better players there. But that's the greatness of this play-in tournament. Like you said, you give other teams the opportunity. And now we see the Hawks beat the Heat, right? We didn't expect that. Teams are able to prove themselves in a situation in an opportunity they didn't have before.
I was so wrong on that Hawks Heat game. I won't lie. Yeah, I mean, the Hawks had no right being where they were.
I've been wrong on 3 of the 4, quite honestly.
I've been wrong on 3. I've been wrong on 3 of the 4 as well. So
about the Lakers.
So let's not be wrong on this. Right now, if you had a pick today, it is April 13th. Oh shit. No, it's Thursday today. I thought it was Friday. There is no show tomorrow Friday. That's why I'm thinking it's Friday. End of the shows for the week. If you had a pick today on April 13th, who's playing for the NBA title and who wins, real quick?
If I had to pick today, I would. So first of all, the Milwaukee Bucks are my pick to win the NBA championship. It's been my pick since the beginning of the year. I'm just going to ride it out at this point. You know what I mean? I picked them at the beginning, so I might as well just ride it out. They're the number 1 team in the NBA record-wise. I would say the Bucks and Phoenix if I had to make a pick right now. And I'm going out on a limb with Phoenix. I know that just because they don't have a ton of chemistry. But you look at the makeup. Well, I guess let me put it this way. You look at the rest of the teams in the West. Sure, if the Golden State Warriors turn it on in the playoffs and turn into a completely different team than they were in the regular season defensively, they can go and win the NBA championship. They obviously have the talent. It's the same team from last year minus 1 or 2 pieces. But looking at the rest of the West, it's a ton of question marks. You have a ton of people in the media talking about the Lakers right now coming in at a 7 seed and saying that they can make it out of the West. I don't think that that's the case, but that shows you how wide open the Western Conference really is. You have the Sacramento Kings at the 3 seed right now, right? Yeah. They're a good team. They had a great season, but that's a really young team. that's going against the Warriors in the first round. You look at Memphis. Look at everything they've dealt with this season, right? Dylan Brooks just won't shut his mouth. Ja Morant just can't stay out of the headlines, out of the newspapers. So I don't know. The West is wide open, but then you look at who has the pedigree, who has the experience, who has the want to prove everybody wrong, right? Chris Paul. So that team just has a lot of factors. They have DeAndre Ayton, the guy that can anchor the center of the defense. They have almost everything you need to win an NBA championship. They've been to the finals before without Kevin Durant. What can they do with one of the best players in the world? So yeah, I would go with the Suns versus the Bucks in the NBA Finals, and I would ultimately go with the Bucks beating the Suns again in the NBA Finals.
That's exactly how I see it playing out, Bucks over the Suns. But I'm just going to tell you that this is how I see it. The Lakers story, man. I think the Lakers stay healthy, and if AD is healthy and motivated, and this could be one swan song. I see the 6, 7, and 8 seed all advancing in the first round, which then puts the Suns as the top remaining seed.
Yeah.
You know, and so it makes the path easy. Like I just don't buy Denver. I don't think Memphis is ready at this point, and they're gonna have a tough matchup with the Lakers.
Yeah.
And then Sacramento, they're just not a 3 seed. I just don't see Golden State losing to Sacramento, which is going to be, like you said earlier, a home big game for a home series. It's gonna be 5, 6, 7 home games for Golden State there, basically.
Yeah.
I think the Suns come out of that group, but it would not surprise me if we get one final bit of LeBron magic, and I want
to see it, honestly.
Milwaukee versus the Phoenix Suns, but what kind of NBA Finals would it be if it was Milwaukee or Boston or anybody? And LeBron is in the finals again at, 38, 39 years old. The storylines, the ratings, the magic that would create, the excitement.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm all for it. I'm actually an anti-Lakers guy, but I'm rooting for the Lakers to get out of the West right now.
Yeah, because right there, when you get to that point, if the Lakers are in, let's say, the Western Conference Finals, and they're pushing to get to the NBA Finals, we're talking about solidifying Bron as the best player ever, right? Like that. Sure. Once you get to that level, you bring the Lakers from where they were at a certain point in this season, and you get to that stature in the NBA this season. That would be incredible, and I would have to tip my cap as somebody who has hammered the table for MJ as the best player ever. I would have to tip my cap to LeBron at that point. So I'll go ahead and put that out there now. If they ultimately make the NBA Finals or even if he wins a championship, my goodness, I think you solidify him as the best player ever.
Wow. Who would have thought we would be at that point? I mean, they could be done. They might get swept in 4.
They might lose the first round. Hey, look, Memphis is and there's a bunch of question marks in the Western Conference. You look at the Clippers against the Suns, no Paul George. But Memphis, they're a wild card rather than a question mark, I would say, because the talent's there. Now, Steven Adams, does he play? When does he come back? That's a big question mark. But the talent's there. Ja, is he in the right headspace? I think that's a big part of this series. But yeah, I think I would lean the Lakers in that series as well, man.
It's crazy not to say that and not sound like a completely insane person.
Yeah. I mean, OKC versus Denver. I mean, but I do get what you're saying, because how can Denver stop OKC from scoring? That's my biggest question mark. They'll be able to score the ball.
I really don't buy Denver. They're a regular season, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we got to wrap up trending the AM right there.
All day.
I gotta get to work. I can hear. I can just hear in the back of my head the clock ticking. I gotta get to the shop. We're gonna wrap it up though there. So thank you, Scotty from DSM Media. Make sure you guys shoot him a follow at Scotty Drown at DSM_media. Follow them all over there. For Philadelphia Sports Network, I am Phil Stifle. There will be no show tomorrow. I got to be at the shop at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Big order, so we're going to be skipping tomorrow's show. So we'll be back next week, Monday. Overreaction Monday. We'll be talking Phillies, Sixers, first playoff game. Everything on the agenda next week. We got some guests lined up for next week as well. So make sure you like, subscribe, follow on all social media platforms. For Philadelphia Sports Network, I am Phil Stifle. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.